Okay, we are live. So if your team is not productive, it's probably not a motivation problem. So, hi, I'm Christina Proctor. I'm an executive coach, and I help leaders and organizations improve their follow through by helping with their productivity, building out systems, and really figuring out where their teams need support. I work with leaders, managers, and organizations, and I absolutely love this stuff because our main focus areas are always productivity systems. What's holding your teams back? Maybe it's you. What are your own leadership habits that are negatively impacting your team? And you may not even know it. And heck, they may not even know it either. And how people actually execute work. So, we're not going to be sharing training tools today. We are really going to be focusing on not pushing people harder. This is about fixing systems and giving people clarity. So if you are watching live, make sure to type live in the chat. I would love to hear from you. So where in the world do productivity items break down? That's what we're going to focus on today. So the real productivity problems live in many different areas. One of them is prioritization within teams. These are patterns I see across organizations, teams, even like very well-run teams with very respected leaders, managers, engaged people who really care about their people. You can still be susceptible to these things. So if your teams are challenged with productivity right now, this live is for you. So patterns we see across teams include things like, and I'm looking at my notes, too many priorities, no ranked work, no prioritization there, vague deadlines, ownership confusion. Ownership confusion is the worst. Interruptions disguised as collaboration. What does that mean? So often we have so many different tools people can ping us on that can range from Teams, Slack, Google Chat. It can also look like over emailing, calling, text messaging. There are so many different ways people can interrupt your flow of your day. So most productivity issues are actually leadership design problems, not people problems. So I would love to hear which one shows up for you the most with your team. We want to give ourselves permission to ask the question, where am I holding my team back? It might be too many priorities. Another thing that I like to talk about with organizations is redefining what productivity actually means. The old model was all about output with pressure, having very strong deadlines, authoritative type, dictator type leadership. The new model is really all about clarity, systems, and energy. What can we do that's very clear, that is very straightforward, that is fast and efficient, while also giving people the energy that they deserve when they go home, so they're not burned out all the time. So execution fails when leaders don't translate goals into daily action. That's where systems come in, okay? It's not an execution challenge. It's a translation problem. It's not a motivation problem. So execution fails when leaders don't translate goals into daily action. And what this looks like are big goals that you might have. Say you want to increase output at your manufacturing plant by 10%. What does that look like in practice? So you might just focus on line efficiency. What you might not be looking at is how your leaders are interacting with each other. That might be bogging down line teams or front or first line supervisors. Because what we don't take into account are the systems in which people are working. How you work is not the tool. Tools are not systems. They are meant to help us get work done. They're not the how. So what I want you to do as a leader is think about how you walk into the office every day, how you arrive, what you do to prioritize your work. If you're somebody that arrives and you're overwhelmed already and you're a little upset and people can feel that, it's really hard to reset once you're at work and in momentum. So if you're somebody who comes in like a stick of dynamite and you just keep going and blasting through one thing after another, it might feel productive. In reality, that's actually more reactive. And that's not great for your staff. What we want you to be able to do is have the process and systems in place as a leader for your staff to know what to expect of you. If they expect that every time that you come in, you're going to be a bull in a china shop and you're just going to throw around orders and throw off their day because how they prioritize their work doesn't align with how you're feeling that day, you are actually ruining their productivity. Now, you might look at me, and I've had this before, and say, well, Christina, prioritization changes every day. I hear you. You might be in a position where you work at a restaurant and the orders didn't get through the night before. So you might need somebody to be able to recognize that and go through and make the cheese order for the pizza. You might need them to go through and make calls to address people who called out that morning. Prioritization does change. However, that can be baked into a system for people to be able to follow. These are important because as you develop systems, you can start to see where the holes and the gaps are. If you're going straight in without a process, you don't always remember or know what's missing. You might say, like, I have it all in my head. All that does is give you cognitive overload. So we want to lessen the cognitive overload. We want to reduce the decisions. And we want to give people flexibility to actually work. So if you come in instead and you say, this week our priorities, or maybe on Friday you say, our priorities next week are these 3 things. Launch a new system, update our January 2026 PTO hours, and everybody prioritize identifying what their next goals are for 2026. So if you have those going in, you know that people should align what they're working on that week with those goals. And ideally, you would have that mapped out on a weekly basis, a monthly, and a quarterly at minimum. And what this does is helps move goals into daily action. So if you have people who say, yes, I understand we want to get a 10% increase in our output in our manufacturing organization, I get that. How does that relate to how HR is going through their work every single day? It impacts it because if HR is only available during certain times and people have to take their lunch break to go talk to HR, that's going to cause some issues potentially on the line. They're not getting a long enough break to rest. They may not have enough time to actually eat a full meal and be tired. And lots of other things that you may not notice that the system is not helping you get where you want to go with your goal. So if you have a goal, you want to make sure you can take a step back and think about the systems that are currently in place to support that goal. And saying, well, I've got a team that can handle that. Well, ask them what they're doing. What does a daily activity look like to go toward that goal? So when you are talking about boosting productivity within your teams, systems are really one of the key things that people are ignoring. They're busy throwing money at tools like software, physical things that they can put into a plant, that they can put into a computer system, instead of focusing on the people and then the systems. Because there are going to be people that need different things versus another member of the team. So at Neurodivergent Ventures, what I always focus on, we've got 3 pillars. We've got people, we've got systems, and then we have tools. Tools are the last thing we focus on, because if you know what your people need, how they work, then you can identify where some of the gaps are and what systems can support them. So that's really how things break down. Okay, what are 3 places productivity breaks down? So what we want to focus on are these things. So the first one is manager input. That's where things break down. The second one are team systems. And the third is individual execution. We're going to go through each one of these one by one. The first thing is manager inputs. What leaders say or don't say. That's the hardest one, what leaders say or don't say. When they ask probably vague things, people do the work and then they end up having to redo it. And then the manager's frustrated. So that's a breakdown in communication system and expectations. You could still have the same goal. You can still reach the same goal. And if the managers are not giving clear direction, rework is going to happen, and that's a waste of time and resources and gets people incredibly frustrated. And we don't want that. So clarity is a leadership skill. So if you are a leader, I want you to think about this. These are the two questions I want you to live by. What does done look like? And when do you need this by? What does done look like? And when do you need this by? Those two questions alone shift the conversation, because when you give somebody a task as a manager, you want to make sure that they understand what those look like. Say you're getting something from your director, your VP, your CEO. It's important to look at them and say, what does done look like for you? Because it could look different for your team because they understand best practices. They know what it looks like in the market. And the CEO or the SVP might sit there and say, done looks like this. And you're like, that is not what I thought it was. And that's important because done looks very different team to team. So having that clarity is a leadership skill. Okay. So that was manager input. Number 2 in the 3 places productivity breaks down is team systems. Where does work live? What gets reviewed weekly? Whose job is what? And who and how are priorities set? So if work lives everywhere in your email, on your desktop, in Box, in Dropbox, on a SharePoint site, accountability lives nowhere. If work lives everywhere, accountability lives nowhere. Because what happens is that people aren't able to review it. People aren't able to go and look at it. So team systems matter. So figuring out where work lives, how it gets reviewed, and how priorities are set is all about team systems. Remember, systems over tools every time. Systems, processes, how people work. Number 3 in the 3 places productivity breakdowns happen with teams are individual execution. So people work differently. It's just life. Everybody works a little differently. Everybody's personality is a little different. That's okay. You can have standard operating procedures. You can also have something called recommended operational procedures and give people some flexibility. Productivity does not equal the same hours and the same methods. We want to be mindful that we don't want somebody who's taking forever on a task. Say it's okay to take forever on a task. We also want to acknowledge that there's going to be times where there are going to be 2 people doing a task. They're going to do it differently, and it's going to come out with the same result. So you have to figure out the threshold on what you're willing to accept as a leader to say, as long as the individual execution is on point, we're okay. As long as individual execution hits the goal and also meets these baselines when it comes to the client needs, data input, etc., we're okay. Standards should be consistent. Execution can be flexible. Standards can be consistent. Execution can be flexible. Okay? So keep that in mind when it comes to individual execution and understanding how people work as one of the main areas where productivity breaks down in teams. So I have a little clip, not a little clip. I have an exercise for you. If you are watching this and you're like, well, what can I do to get started on boosting my team's productivity? So here's some questions I want you to answer. So if you are wanting and you're ready as a leader to boost your team's productivity, ask yourself these questions. Number 1, what task keeps stalling? What task keeps stalling on my team, in my meetings, with my staff? What's unclear? Are there priority challenges? Is ownership unclear? Are there deadlines? I want you to think about those 2 questions, starting with what task keeps stalling. It could be that the tool is delayed, the bandwidth on the internet is slogging along. What is stalling and what is unclear? And you figure this out not just by talking with people, but looking at your results. You independently as a leader can go back and see, are you hitting goals? Why are you not? If you are, where could you speed things up to not just hit more, but be more productive and efficient and focused and utilizing your resources? So I want you to come up with a few examples. And if you would like to send those to me, you are welcome. You can put them right here in the chat. Or you could also review those with your own colleagues, with fellow managers, and say, hey, I noticed that these tasks keep stalling. What do you think about that? Are you seeing the same thing? You don't have to find a solution. I encourage you not to, because what you want to do is also talk with your team. And so, like we said, standards should be consistent, execution can be flexible. When it came to the team execution challenge with productivity, I want you to acknowledge that when you have challenges, you can be flexible in how you fix it. And so that means connecting with others. So if this is resonating with you, I do offer team productivity audits, leadership coaching. That is a big part of what I do every day, as well as management training on how to learn to be more effective and an efficient leader yourself to lead for your team so that they can also see it. We don't focus on diagnostics, who's working slower than somebody else and whose fault it is. We focus on people and their needs, systems for support and efficiency and effectiveness, and then the tools to help them get there. So you can't fix what you don't diagnose and recognize. So that's what we're here for. So if you are ready, I'm welcome to type a question in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, I would love to invite you to do a productivity and leadership audit. I have those available on my Substack. You can find out more information on those there. And we really do have some phenomenal trainings coming up in January and February 2026. I will be announcing those in the next week, right before the new year turns over to 2026. So I want to leave with this. Fixing productivity is a leadership capability. It's not a personality trait. So focusing on productivity, you don't need to leave it to the people who are type A's or are chronically organized or over-organized to get fixed. That's not what we're here to do. So we want to stop fixing people and start fixing systems. And it really does start with leading with clarity. So when you design better systems, people rise to the occasion. If you are looking for additional support, you know where to find me. You can find more information on my website, neurodivergentventures.com, or I would love for you to follow me right here on Substack. In the meantime, lead with clarity, know your goals and where you're going. See you soon.